Awake in the dawn, the cockpit is calling. Throttle in hand, my heartbeat is stalling. Jet engines roar, the runways ahead. Into the skies of DCS, I'm led. Fly high, touch the sky, in the world of DCS, where heroes don't die. Chasing the horizon, a digital dance. In this world of flight, I take my chance. Missiles inbound, the radar's alive, dodging and weaving. I strive to survive. Friendly voice in my ear, guiding me through. Trust in my wingman. That's what we do. Fly high, touch the sky. In the world of DCS, where dreams never die. Chasing the horizon, breaking the trance. In this realm of warfare, it's more than a glance. Rolling and diving, I feel so alive. In this digital world, we all thrive. G-forces pulling, the world fades away. In the skies of DCS, I'll forever stay. Landing gear down, the runway grows near. Another mission done, shedding a tear. For friends lost in battle and memories made. In the skies of DCS, legends won't fade. Fly high, beyond the sky. In the world of DCS, where spirits fly by. Chasing the sunset, tales to enhance. In this digital haven, we all get a chance. Engines shut down, the night silence falls, awaiting the next call to answer war's calls. In the skies of DCS, my heart will reside, for in this world, I truly find pride.
What is happening, ladies and gentlemen? I'd like to welcome you back to EGGRO VR. Today is going to be the best DCS VR settings guide that I have provided to you so far. We're going to start off in the BIOS, and I'll share said footage of overclocking my CPU, my memory, and my GPU. We're also going to dive into some settings and some changes, what to do and what not to do. I'm going to share overlays of why not to do certain situations, like having HAGS on. HAGS on, yes, it works better than it used to, but there's still a 1 millisecond deficit, and I'll share said results. Without further ado, let's dive in. Here we go. Okay, once you restart your PC, you're going to spam either your F2 or delete key. I repeat, F2 or delete key, spam until you launch into BIOS. Once you're in the BIOS, we're going to first hit F7 to get to this menu, and we're going to enable XMP. After that, hit F7 again to get out, and then we're going to click where it says resizable bar. We're going to turn that on, if that is available. Next, we're going to go to Extreme Tweaker. We're going to scroll down. ASUS Multi-Core Enhancement, I'm going to enable and remove all limits. Performance core ratio by core usage. Cores 1 through 4, I'm going to set to 51. That is 5-1. Cores 5 through 8, I'm going to set to 50. That is 50. Below that's efficiency or efficient core ratio. We're going to sync all cores, and all core ratio limit we're going to set to 40. Below that, we're going to click into Digi VRAM. CPU load line calibration we're going to set to level 6. Bear in mind, even identical CPUs can act differently with this, so check for system stability. If this doesn't work, you can lower some values. Next, we're going to go to ring down bin and disable the ring down bin. Min and max CPU cache ratio we're going to set to 41. That is 4-1. BCLK aware adaptive voltage enabled, and right below that, actual VRAM core voltage we're going to set to manual mode. CPU core voltage override set to 1.35. And I found this to work. It's probably the most stable overclock I've had so far. CPU configuration, we're going to click that. This is under advanced. We're going to scroll down where it says hyper-threading. Enable that unless you're rocking a 32 core processor. CPU power management, we're going to click there. We're going to scroll down to CPU C states, and we're going to enable this. And that's about it. So once you have this done, just click F10 and hit OK, and you are out, and you're gold. And Anisotropic filtering, we're just going to set that to application controlled. And what is it, you may ask? It's also abbreviated as AF. It's a technique used to enhance the clarity and crispness of the textures when viewed at oblique angles. Before we had anisotropic filtering, we had what is called bilinear and trilinear filtering. They made textures clearer, but mainly when viewed only head-on. So we're just going to set that to application controlled. Alright, next up we're going to change anti-aliasing mode, and we're going to change that to enhance the application setting. After that, your anti-aliasing settings will set to 2 times. But what is anti-aliasing and why use it? It is often abbreviated as AA. It is a technique used in PC graphics to reduce the appearance of jagged edges or jaggies in images. These jagged edges occur due to the limited number of pixels on a screen, which can be caused or cause diagonal or curved lines to appear stepped or even broken when rendered. Power management mode, we're going to set that to prefer maximum performance. And as the name suggests, with this setting, the GPU will always operate at its maximum performance level, regardless of any task being performed. The reason for setting this in program settings is quite obvious. We don't want that running all the time. You can set it in global settings, but I would suggest probably just set it in program settings under Digital Combat Simulator. Texture filtering, anisotropic sample optimization. This is a setting related to anisotropic filtering AF, which, as previously mentioned, is a technique used to maintain clarity at oblique angles. This specific setting, however, tweaks how AF functions for the sake of performance. We're just going to turn this off. Texture filtering, negative LOD bias. This is a feature that is related to texture filtering, otherwise known as LOD bias. LOD stands for the level of detail. In the context of 3D graphics and gaming, LOD is a technique that involves using different texture resolutions or model complexities based on the distance from the camera. Things closer to the camera use higher detail textures or models, and those further away use simpler ones to improve the performance. Texture filtering quality, we're going to set to higher performance. This will prioritize performance over texture quality. The GPU will use faster, less resource-intensive methods for texture filtering, which can lead to increased frames per second. However, textures, especially at oblique angles or distances, may appear blurrier or less detailed compared to higher quality settings. Texture filtering, trilinear optimization, we're just going to turn that to on. This setting is one of those options related to how textures are filtered in 3D applications and games. So we're just going to turn this on. Vertical sync, we're just going to have this off. There's many reasons, but VR is very demanding. High frame rates for smooth performance enabling VSync might limit the frame rate to the refresh rate of the HMD, so in this case 90 FPS. I would just turn that off. Virtual reality pre-rendered frames refers to the number of frames that the CPU prepares in advance for the GPU when rendering for virtual reality. This setting helps manage the balance between input latency and performance. With more frames pre-rendered, the GPU always has work to do, which can lead to a smoother performance and fewer drop frames. However, the trade-off is that input latency can be higher since the data being rendered could be several times old by the time it's actually displayed. I just set this to 3. I have a i7-12700K, but it is overclocked. If your CPU is lacking, then maybe drop it down to 2 or even try 1. Moving on to global settings, we're going to change a couple settings and that's it. First up, shader cache size. This setting relates to the feature that aims to improve graphical performance and reduce CPU workload in games and applications. A shader is a type of program used in 3D rendering to handle various graphical effects, such as lighting, shadows, and post-processing. Shaders are frequently compiled at runtime, meaning when you start or during the operation of a game or software. This compilation process requires time and can introduce notable delays or stutters in games, especially when you encounter new environments or effects for the first time. We're just going to set that to 10 gigabytes. And the only other setting that we change in global settings is vertical sync. Obviously you want that off in your global settings.
because we have it set in program settings.
Last up, we're just going to adjust our desktop color settings. In particular, we're going to change our digital vibrance from the stock 50%. We're going to bring that up to 65%. This is just going to make everything pop in VR. If you prefer that not to be so vibrant, you can bring that down, just for your preference. Next, I am going to turn off core isolation, and you might be asking yourself, what is core isolation? It's a good question. It's a security feature in Windows 10 or later versions, such as Windows 11, that uses hardware virtualization to provide an additional layer of protection against malicious software. It also isolates certain processes from the main operating system to enhance security. One specific feature of core isolation is memory integrity, which helps prevent malicious actors from tampering with Windows processes. Ooh. Anyways, I just turn it off. I turn it back on when I'm not gaming, but I turn it off while I am. Now, what are the performance impacts, you might ask? And that's also a good question. While core isolation's impact on general performance is often minimal, in gaming scenarios where every bit of performance counts, even a small decrease in frame rates or increase in input lag can be noticeable. Remember, folks, we are trying to squeeze out every last frame that we can get. DCS is demanding in virtual reality. So for now, I would at least encourage you to try it out, turn it off, and then just check to see if it's stable, if your frame time improves. If it doesn't, then have it on. It's totally up to you. This one's not a major hit in performance, it's just minimal. But like I said, we want to squeeze out every little bit that we can. Now, how to get to core isolation? To the Windows search, and then we're going to type in check for updates, like you would for a Windows update. Scroll to the left, we're going to look for Windows security. Then we're going to scroll down to where it says device security. Right there, core isolation details. Click there. And memory integrity prevents attacks from inserting malicious code into high security processes, as explained. We just click that off. You will have to restart your PC for that to take effect. Let's turn off HAGS, otherwise known as Hardware Accelerated GPU Scheduling. What is it, you may ask? Well, it's designed, and it was designed to improve GPU performance and reduce latency by allowing the GPU to manage its own video memory, aka VRAM, directly rather than relying on the operating system to do this. Now, it's not... Okay, in the past, HAGS was an issue like 100%. You have it off regardless for virtual reality and DCS. Now, you can have HAGS on, but as I'm showing you, and I will show you, there is a small performance hit. And again, we're trying to squeeze every last drop out of frame times that we can get and lower our latency. If you are experiencing issues with DCS VR, which you wouldn't be here if you weren't, it might be worth trying to disable HAGS to see if it resolves the problem. So that's what we're doing. As always with features like this, the impact can vary depending on your specific hardware and software configuration. So it's always a good idea to experiment and see what works best for your particular setup. I can't really say much more. I mean, try it out if it works, and if you do notice a decrease in performance, then turn it back on. Your system could be completely different than mine, but in my case, and that's why I'm sharing this, and I'm going to show you the overlay, in my case, there is a difference from 0.5 to over 1 millisecond. I will share that a little further into this video. Okay, so now for the fun stuff, we're going to go to MSI Afterburner, and we're going to set a modest overclock like I had said. This isn't going to generate a ton of heat and power consumption, nothing like that. It is a modest overclock, but it is enough to change the game. Power limit, we're going to drag up to 106, and that'll bring up your temperature to 88 degrees. Right below it, we're going to go down to core clock, and we're going to raise that from 0 to 100. So click where it says 0, type 100, hit enter. Same with the memory clock. Click where it says 0, we're going to bring that up to 250. That is 250. Hit enter. Check mark, click that, left click, and then you see your frequency will go up from 10,500, 10,005 or 751, and your boost clock will go up to 2850 depending on your card, but my GPU goes up to 2850 megahertz during gameplay. When you want to dial back and you're done your game, go back to stock, drag your power limit to 100, that'll bring down the temp limit, core clock 0, memory clock back to 0, hit enter, and that's good. Your overclock is disengaged. Back to stock. All right, so these are my digital combat simulator virtual reality settings. Some of these settings are super important and they may look low, but we are rocking a pretty high resolution HMD. And I do have the 4090 with an overclocked CPU. And even then, I still like to keep these settings here and I make up for it in the render scaling in OXRTK. But setting that I find important, texture quality, I like to leave this at high. This setting affects the resolution of textures on objects. Higher quality textures enhance visual fidelity in VR. I would say try to keep this at high. If all else fails, I wouldn't compromise with this setting or terrain textures. Terrain texture quality, again, high. Similar to texture quality, this affects ground textures and terrain details. Higher settings improve realism. How about you folks? I play this sim just for the realism. I find this is my go-to sim for that exact reason. Civil traffic, how important are cars? If I'm flying a plane, I really don't care about cars. And by disabling civilian traffic, it also reduces CPU load times and improves performance in virtual reality. Do you really want cars on? I personally always keep that off. There is a tax hit, so consider that when you're adjusting your graphics or your settings. Water. Now, water, by turning this off, can improve performance without significant visual impact. To me, I didn't notice a difference having that low versus having that high visually. So if there's a tax hit, I'm turning that low or off, whatever. Visible range. That is something that I will change depending on the module that I'm flying and flying said module. Say if I'm flying Sinai, obviously I'm going to have that off. Sinai with the Apache or Syria with an F-18, I'm going to have that to low. But for the most part, I will fly it at medium if I'm flying the F-16 in Caucasus or say the Huey in Nevada. Heat blur is not terribly important. More or less a 2D thing, or for me, for recording purposes, I will have heat blur on, but everything has its tax hit. Regardless of what people say, every one of these settings has a minor tax hit on either your CPU, GPU, or any hardware within your PC. Shadows, there is a huge tax hit. Again, this is one I'll only bump up to flat only, depending on the module or where I'm flying said module. I will bump that up, but for the case of this video, we're just going to leave that off. Flat shadows, blur off, it's not even available. Secondary shadows off, and resolution. It's at 4K right now just for recording purposes, but just lower that as low as your monitor can go, because it really doesn't matter what's going on your monitor while you're in your HMD. One screen for monitor. Res of cockpit, this is important. I like the crispness of having it at 1024. You could lower this and gain some performance to 512 every frame. MSAA, there's a huge tax hit. Multi-sample anti-aliasing reduces jagged edges and provides smoother visuals. Higher settings can be demanding in VR. So again, that's one setting that I will bring up for those sweet visuals, but most of the time it's just off. But if I am going to be flying the Huey or something, lower res fidelity aircraft, then yeah, bump it up to 2. Depth of field, how important, we're just not even going to talk about it, it's off. Lens effect, none. Motion blur, off, as always. And motion blur amount, obviously as low as the amount value will be, is 1, so we're going to just leave it there. Clouds, I'm just going to go down the list fast. Clouds is low, but you can change clouds to high and still maintain your 90 frames per second. Again, depending on where you're flying. For the most part, I don't see a huge difference. I just like it to leave it at low just for that performance gain as possible. But you can bring it up as well as visible range, shadows, and MSAA times 2. Those are the settings I'll change. Now, clutter and grass, it's not a huge difference, but I am a ground hugger, so I like to leave that a little higher. It's at 750, but you can lower that. And again, like I said, each one of these setting values does have an impact on your performance. So if you lower that, you're not going to see much of a difference in visuals as well, but just get a small gain in performance. Forest visibility, I just leave it there, usually about 60%. Not a big deal. Forest detail factor, I like to leave that at about 0.58. Scenery detail factor to me is important. I like to leave that at 1, so that's maxed out. And the preload radius, I always run about 90,000, but in this case, 89,500. Chimney smoke density at 1 and gamma at 2. Recommended when I first started flying the sim was 2.2 if I'm correct. I found that to be a little too bright, so I lowered that to 1.8 and then found the sweet spot of 2. It's each to their own. I mean, your preference could be 1.8. External field of view at 78 degrees and anisotropic filtering at 16 times. Terrain object shadows default. And cockpit global illumination we have off. There is a bit of a tax hit there as well. You can have it on, but like I said, performance, right? So we're gonna just keep this off for now. Message font scale 1 and scale GUI 1. Rain droplets, I love them, sweet rain effect. So we're gonna leave that checked. VSync, who cares? Full screen and cursor confined to your game window. You could have those checked, but that's your just personal preference. For now, I'm leaving it. We're going to go over to the VR tab. And now this is important. Check enable virtual reality headset. If you want to launch your game and then just launch in your HMD, just have that checked. Pixel density is super important. If you're rocking, say, last gen hardware or the gen before, you can lower this to 0.9 or 0.8 at not a terrible visual impact. And again, like I said, we're going to bring up render scaling in OXRTK. For me, for the hardware I just have that at 1.0. If you're struggling, just drop it down to 0.9 and you will probably see a performance gain. Next up, Force IPD I have at 60, so that's 60. And MSAA mass size at 0.42. Those are my DCS VR settings. Okay, for those of you fond of using process Lasso while DCS is running, you're going to go to active process. CPU priority, we're going to set that always at high. IO priority always at high. Memory profile, we're going to set to normal, always. Power profile, bitsum highest performance. Scroll down, induce performance mode, and minimize that and just have it running in the background. All right, to our OXRTK settings. So I'm going to bring up the menu here. And performance overlay I have set to advanced. Target frame rates off, upscaling sharpenings off. Fixed foveated rendering I have the preset to performance and wide. But one thing you can do is turn that off and just see how good that looks. It's just fun to check it out. It looks so much better. But it does perform better having the preset to performance and wide. Turbo mode, experimental is on. Then we're going to scroll over to appearance. Post-processing I have on. Inputs, system, override resolution, we're going to say yes. Display resolution per eye, 3250 by 3179. Motion reprojections at default, but you can turn it off because we're not using it. Menu, you want to do this, just set your menu timeout to none, and that's all you need to do. Okay.